Hello, hi, thank you very much for joining us once again. Welcome back. Today we will have a discussion regarding the various factors which will have an impact on the businesses. Like what is the impact of interest rate on the businesses, what is the impact of exchange rate on the businesses, what is the impact of monetary policy on the business, what is the impact of fiscal policy on the business. So let's start our discussion. Environment. Business exists in a particular environment. Business doesn't exist in the vacuum. It is a part of a larger entity, and this larger entity is called the business environment. So businesses are a part of a larger entity, and this larger entity called business environment. So business environment can be two types. One is a micro environment, one is a macro environment. Micro environment, it influences the functionality of a particular business. Micro environment, it has a direct impact on your business. Micro environment includes customers, suppliers, resellers, and competitors. On the other hand, a macro environment will show us a larger picture. It affects the operations of all existing businesses in the market. It will have an indirect impact on the businesses. It includes economic factors, demographic factors, technological changes, political factors, and so many other factors as well. So we can say business exists in environment, and there are two types of environment. One is micro environment, second is macro environment. Micro environment will affect the business only. Macro environment will affect the all businesses. Micro environment will have a direct impact on the business, while macro environment will have indirect impact on the businesses. Micro environment includes directly related parties with the businesses like customers, suppliers, competitors. On the other hand, macro environment includes various factors like economic factor, demographic factor, technological changes, political factor, which will have impact on all businesses. We will continue our discussion regarding the macro environment only. We will see what is a macro environment, what are the macro environment targets. So what are the tools that are being used by the government to achieve the macro environment targets, and what are those tools will have an impact on the business. So as I discussed, in the macro environment, there are macro targets and macro level tools. So macro targets are there, and to achieve those macro targets, government is applying the macro level tools. So what are the macro targets? These are the key macro targets or objectives of the government. Government wanted to control the inflation. Government wanted to go for full employment. Government wanted to keep balance of payment stability, and government wanted to keep favorable balance of payment. Government wanted to achieve economic growth. These are the targets of the government. And to achieve these targets, government is using usually these key macro level tools. Government is using monetary policy, fiscal policy, exchange rate, and external trade. These are the key factors that government is usually using to achieve the macro level targets. So there are macro targets, and to achieve the macro target, government is applying macroeconomic policies, or government is adopting macroeconomic tools. So on overall basis, these are the policies, these are the tools government is usually using to achieve the macro level economic objectives. These four policies, these four tools which are being used by the government, these are not mutually exclusive. Means it doesn't mean government will be using one tool at a one time. No, government will be using multiple tools at the same time, and government will see what is the best mix to achieve the macro level targets. So while applying these tools, there are chances of conflict. Might be government is achieving one thing, the government at the same time compromising another thing. Like just I wanted to give you an example. In case of growth in employment, if the government is looking for steady economic growth, then definitely it will not be too much employment. But the reason is government is looking for steady growth and it will have impact on the employment. So I can say steady growth policy adopted by the government, it will be inversely proportional with the employment. At the same time, government and growth and jobs versus imports. Now, on the other hand, if the government has adopted aggressive strategy, government is thinking to go for a growth, there are a lot of jobs will be there. When growth will be there, demand will be there, production will be there. At the same time, might be our imports will go up. So, growth versus import, these are two directly proportional factors. Initially, we discussed government is trying to cut the imports to have a favorable balance of payment. So now government will have to import to meet the demand of the local production. So it means government is achieving growth, government is getting jobs, but on the other hand government is increasing imports as well. Since factors are not mutually exclusive, lot of factors can be applied at the same time. So government is achieving a best mix for the best possible result, but still this best mix will have some sort of problems. These problems will be inadequate information, time lag between the policy and implementation, political pressures, unpredictable side effect of policies, the influence of other countries, conflict between policy instrument. So these are the factors which will have an impact on the best mix as well. What is fiscal policy? As we discussed earlier, fiscal policy deals with the government collections and government spendings. This fiscal policy is helpful for the government to use this as an instrument to aggregate the demand. Government is basically controlling demand with the help of fiscal policy. How government is doing this? Government is basically doing this. Suppose government is collecting 100 from the market and government is spending 100 in the market. At the country level, it will not have any impact on the demand. On the other hand, if government is collecting more, it will reduce the purchasing power of the people. Once it will reduce the purchasing power of the people, then it will lead to less demand. On the other hand, if the government is spending more money, it will give more purchasing power to the people and it will lead to more demand. So we can say with the help of fiscal policy, government is controlling the demand. What is the effect of fiscal policy on the businesses? As we discussed earlier, government is using this as a tool to control the aggregate demand. So what will be the, other than this, what will be the tax effect if the government is collecting more money from the market, more money from the businesses and public, government will be applying taxes. Once the government will be applying taxes, tax itself will have impact on the businesses. Like what will the impact of sales tax, excise duty, additional taxes, all these taxes will have an effect on the business, maybe in the form of cost, might be in the form of administrative cost, might be the businesses are absorbing the taxes, might be businesses are shifting the taxes to the end user. So ultimately it will have an impact on the businesses. Monetary policy. Monetary policy aims to influence monetary variables like rate of interest and money supply in order to achieve the set targets by the government. Through this, government controls supply of money in the market. To control the supply of money in the market, government is usually applying two types of tools. One is open market operations, and the second is interest rate. Open market operations. Through the open market operations, government is buying securities or government is selling securities in the market. If the government is buying securities from the market, means government is throwing money in the market. Once money will be in the market, it will lead to more purchasing power, more demand, more production, more employment. But the negative impact is when more money will be in the market, the value of the piece of paper will come down, which will lead to inflation. On the other hand, if government wanted to decrease the supply of money in the market, government will start selling securities in the market. Once this security will be sold in the market, people will buy, people will pay money to the government. When the people will buy, the purchasing power of the people will come down, demand will come down, production will come down, and it will lead to production will come down, and it will increase the importance of the piece of paper, which is money. And this increase in importance in the piece of paper will lead to deflation. How the interest rate? When the government is increasing the interest rate, it will lead to lower borrowing, lower spending, lower demand, lower supply. It will lead to deflation. On the other hand, when the government will lower the interest rate, means interest rate has come down, lot of people will borrow. People's borrowing power will go up, higher borrowing. Lower interest rate means higher borrowing, higher spending, higher demand, higher supply. Again, it will lead to inflation because the importance of the piece of paper will come down due to the lot of supply of money in the market. So ultimately, open market operations or changes in the interest rate will have an impact on the supply of money. Supply of money will have an impact on the production, growth, employment, etc. Exchange rate. Exchange rate is a rate at which one country currency is quoted against the other country's currency. Say how USD is quoted against GBP. This is exchange rate. Exchange rates are usually determined by supply and demand. Sometimes government is involving also. So government is sometimes tweaking the interest rates to change the exchange rates. As we discussed, demand and supply of the money will determine the exchange rate. But this demand and supply itself is subject to few influences like rate of inflation, interest rate, balance of payments, total income and expenditure, total income and expenditures. These are the factors that will have an impact on the demand and supply of money. So how exchange rate will affect the businesses? Suppose if the business is in importing, if the business is in import, it will change the cost of import, value of export, interest rate. In case of local currency appreciates, if the local currency is appreciating, means it will become expensive for the people, for the company which are living out of the country. So if local currency appreciates, makes export more expensive, imports less costly. In this, importer will be the winner. If local currency depreciates, it will make exports cheaper, imports are more expensive, and exporter will be the winner. So this is how exchange rate will have an impact on the businesses. Trade policy. Our fourth point is trade policy. Trade policy refers to the regulations and agreement that controls import and export to foreign countries. Means trade policy governs international trade. There are three different barriers, trade barriers across the border. One is the tariff, second is non-tariff barriers, third one are the quota. Tariff means are the imposed by the government on imported goods. Like you can see the situation nowadays between China and America. In the non-tariff barriers, government is not applying tariff, but government is applying some sort of restriction on the quality, quantity, ingredients. It will be helpful to control the import as well. In the quota, government is specifically defining the specific quota, and more than this thing, goods cannot be imported. This is how usually governments are protecting its own industries. How trade policy affect businesses? The effect of the trade policy, it depends in which type of business you are. Might be you are export oriented businesses or import oriented businesses. If you have export oriented businesses, it will have tough time in case of import tariff in the destination country. If you are import oriented businesses, it will have a tough time in case of imports tariff in its own country. So it depends basically in which type of business you are, and trade policy will have an impact your business accordingly. There are some other factors as well which the government is usually adopting to, and these factors will have an impact on the businesses as well. Like government is doing some sort of regulations, and where the government is applying the regulations because government wanted to use efficient use of resources. Government didn't want to see the dominance of one party. There is some social cost as well of pollution and smoking. Government is making regulations related to this, so it will have an impact related businesses as well. In case of imperfect informations, consumer will sacrifice. The government will make the regulations so that maximum information will be provided to the related customer, so they will be able to have a better decision making. So usually regulations, government is adopting these different types of regulations which will have impact on the businesses as well, like competition policy, monopolies and mergers, regulation related to restrictive practices, corporate governance regulations. All these regulations implemented by the government will have an impact on the businesses as well. And sometimes government is adopting the deregulation policy. This is called liberalization, is opposite of regulation. In this, government is leaving the market forces free, and market forces are ascertaining the outcome. Next is the government assistance. Sometimes government is providing assistance to the businesses as well. This is how government is intervening into the market. Like nowadays, government is providing assistance to a lot of businesses at a time when the corona is in the market. A lot of businesses are being affected, and government is providing assistance to the businesses. So it will, any sort of assistance, subsidy, cash grants given by the government, it will have a favorable impact on the businesses. Government sometimes is adopting green policies also, because externalities will have effect on the production as well as consumption activities. Government wanted to keep the environment clean. Government wanted to protect the environment, and to protect the environment, government is applying various tools. Like government wanted to, the government might be, say, a policy will be polluter pay policies, or government can bring direct legislation also. In case of polluter pay policy, government can say one solution is to levy a tax on polluters equal to the cost of removing the externalities they generate. So these are the policies sometimes government is adopting to control the pollution, which will have impact on the businesses as well. This is over from my side. Thank you very much for joining.